Hi guy, welcome back Spoilers TV. Cain re-entered Lily's life this time not like a man returning for love, but like someone who knows exactly where the weakest doors are in a house that once belonged to him. He carried a softness that felt rehearsed, gestures wrapped in a carefully fitted remorse that looked believable enough for outsiders to swear they were witnessing a rebirth. But Lily was no longer the woman who could be won by memory alone. She had lived through too many cycles of promises and betrayals not to recognize that the most dangerous thing isn't a direct strike, but an embrace that tightens until you forget you're being suffocated. On the surface, Cain was trying to repair what he broke. He appeared at the right moments, said the right things, did the right favors, always positioning himself so Lily might see him as a man who was changing. And that persistence was exactly what unsettled her, because she couldn't deny that somewhere inside her, there were still soft places that remembered what safety once felt like. That remembered a version of Cain who made her believe their future could endure. Her wavering didn't arrive as a decision. It came as hairline cracks in her defense quietly, gradually. Terrifying Glabeus, the more real her feelings became, the greater the risk of being used, with the pressure around the AI fight making every relationship feel more strategic and transactional. Lily refused to let herself be naive. Anyone could stage a heroic moment to mask a dirty endgame. And Cain had always been too skilled at turning intention into a convincing performance. So the more he tried to prove he was better, the more Lily studied the gaps in his story, the pauses that lasted a second too long, the phone screen he angled away when she approached, the calls that came at hours that didn't make sense, and the effortless way he brushed them off as nothing. Lily didn't explode. She chose coldness because she understood that anger too early would only make her reactive, while the one directing the show would still be Cain. She began to wonder if everything he was doing was truly repentance, or if it was a stage designed to turn her into a moved audientially, to lead her back to the exact place he wanted her. And then came the moment that turned suspicion into something solid and icy. It wasn't a confession. It wasn't someone handing her proof. It was reality slipping into her ears in the cruelest way. Through a mysterious call she happened to overhear, or a thread of messages she wasn't meant to see, messages that carried the unmistakable scent of AI. Lily didn't need the whole conversation. She only needed fragments, a term too specific to be innocent. A name she never wanted connected to Cain again. A tone he only used when he was negotiating rather than telling the truth. In that instant, every tender gesture Cain had worked so hard to build fell off him like a cloak yanked away, exposing the familiar core beneath calculation. Lily stood there as if her future had collapsed right in front of her. The most terrifying part wasn't simply that Cain still had ties to eight, was that he could remain so composed while turning back to her, still able to place reconciliation on his lips as if it were the only truth that mattered. That contradiction hurt, but it also sharpened her. If Cain was still connected to Phyllis, if he was still leveraging AI as a power play, then all his efforts to win Lily back could be part of something bigger, reclaiming AI while using Lily as living proof of his changed man narrative, so that when he struck, he could wear morality like armor and no one would dare question him. The feeling of being turned into a tool tightened Lily's throat. She had been the one who believed, the one who forgave, the one who offered second chances even while her own heart was splitting. But she didn't want to become the predictable ending of a story Cain always controlled from the beginning. That was why she began to watch him, not because she enjoyed secrecy, but because she knew the truth doesn't step into the light on its own when the person hiding it is determined to keep the shadows intact. Lily hated herself in that role. There were moments she felt she was betraying her own values, stepping into a darkness she had sworn she'd never live in again. But she hated even more the idea that Cain might use her kindness to complete his double objective. So she learned to observe in silence, to keep her pain beneath the surface and turn it into focus. She watched Cain leave with an excuse that sounded reasonable, watched him slip out of sight like a man with nothing to hide. And that confidence chilled her more than anything, because it looked exactly like the confidence of someone who believed every piece was already in place. Lily followed without rushing, without panic. She kept her distance like a thin cord between logic and emotion because if anger led her, she'd make mistakes. Every step she took was both resolve and heartbreak. She didn't want to see what she feared, but she couldn't turn round and pretend she hadn't heard what she heard. And then she found him, Cain meeting Phyllis in secret. The scene didn't need to be loud to become a blade. The way they stood, just a little too close to be normal. The way Cain looked at Phyllis with the kind of concentration he had been trying to give Lily. The ease in their silence, those details were enough to tell Lily this wasn't accidental. It had purpose. It had structure. It smelled like a plan. Lily didn't rush out. She didn't create a spectacle, because she understood an outburst would give Cain room to twist the narrative, and Phyllis room to rewrite herself as the victim. Lily stayed in the dark, listening, watching, letting the truth burn away whatever hope she had left. Cain and Phyllis talked about reclaiming control, about strategy, about positioning themselves to look like the people who saved the situation in everyone else's eyes. And what broke Lily wasn't the content alone, but what it revealed underneath. Cain and Phyllis were working closely, and that partnership wasn't just about AI. It was about the kind of double game Lily had begun to see with painful clarity. Cain wanted AI. Cain wanted power. Cain wanted to win a chess match he had chosen to start. But Cain also wanted Lily not as an equal love, but as a key to unlock the door he needed. Lily realized her heart had been dragged onto the same table as technology and ambition, where reconciliation could be nothing more than a side branch of the real plan. That realization didn't just make Lily jealous or wounded, it ignited something deeper. Fury at being underestimated, fury at Cain believing she wouldn't see through him, fury at herself for softening at all. She saw how Cain could stage a heroic moment so that later, if his AI scheme succeeded, he could return to Lily as the man who saved the day and proved he deserved trust, forcing her into a trap where she either forgave him or looked like the cruel woman who refused to give anyone a chance. And she hated that Cain didn't merely want what he wanted to control how Lily saw him. While he took it, Lily returned home in a state she barely recognized, hollow and sharp at the same time. She didn't want to cry because tears would feel like a gift to Cain, proof he still had the power to hurt her. She didn't want to confront him, because confrontation would be asking for answers from the person who was actively choosing deception. She wanted to know what to do next so she wouldn't become the victim of a game that had been designed before she even realized she was a piece. Lily's motive clarified into something hard. She didn't just need to protect herself. She needed to reclaim ownership of her life's story. Yet that resolve collided with the softest, most dangerous part of her. She still carried memories of loving Cain, of believing in days when they weren't enemies. That softness was exactly why this hurt like humiliation. If she'd felt nothing, this would be information. But because she had wavered, because she had allowed herself to imagine forgiveness, the discovery became a personal violation. Lily understood Cain had noticed her vulnerability and planned to exploit it. That was what made him the fraud she had feared from the start, a man who knew how to play better, long enough to make someone else open the door willingly. Lily refused to be the one opening it again, but she also refused to let Cain walk away with dignity. Still, there would be no shouting, no dramatic confrontation. The subtle change in Lily's eyes as Cain returned to her, wearing the familiar mask of regret. She listened to him keep pushing the story forward, pretending they were making progress, pretending trust could be rebuilt. And Lily realized something colder than heartbreak. If she wanted to know what Cain truly was, she couldn't expose him immediately, because a man like Cain always has an escape route, always has a way to paint her as paranoid. Lily began to think like someone who understood the rules of this world. If Cain and Phyllis had a strategy, if they were running a double game, then Lily had to step into the danger with her eyes open. She started considering the most ruthless possibility, whether she should pretend to forgive him, pretend to soften a little more on it to return to him, but to watch the entire AI plan unfold, to learn where their weakness was, to understand exactly when and where to cut the wires. The thought disgusted her because it meant she would have to act in a place she despised, wearing the mask of trust while her heart was grinding itself to dust. But Lily also knew if she walked away now, Cain and Phyllis would keep moving unhindered, and one day they would succeed, leaving her with only the label of the woman who was too naive. Lily no longer wanted to be defined by naivete. The tension inside Lily wasn't only about what she would do to Cain, it was about what she would do to the soft part of herself. Would she kill it, or would she use it as bait? The harder Cain tried to prove he was good, the clearer Lily saw that goodness might be nothing more than the front side of a two-way mirror. On the other side, Cain was still chasing power, still keeping Phyllis close enough to make every tactic run smoothly. And the more Lily thought, the more she understood the most frightening truth wasn't that Cain could betray her, was that he could betray her and still expect forgiveness, still expect love, as if Lily existed to sanitize the consequences of his choices. Lily held her composure like she was pressing a wound closed to stop it from bleeding. She knew the biggest question now wasn't whether Cain was dangerous, but whether Lily was ready to look that danger in the face and choose the right response. She had seen Cain and Phyllis plotting AI together. She had seen the quiet chemistry of a partnership built on ambition. She had seen the outline of a game, in which she was meant to be the decorative proof of his redemption. And she had discovered a new power in herself, the power of a woman who no longer needs to believe to be loved, who no longer needs to forgive to be considered good. When Cain stepped closer, Lily retreated inside herself, not to run, but to prepare her next move. Would she expose him now and accept an open war, or would she stay silent a little longer? Let Cain walk deeper into the trap he built, and then be the one who collapses everything at the exact moment he believes he has already won? And when Lily looked into the mirror that night, she stopped asking whether she could forgive Cain. She asked a question that shifted the entire story into darker territory. If Cain is using love as a weapon to reclaim AI, what will Lily use to reclaim herself, and how long will she let him keep playing before she strikes first? The truth was that neither of them walked into this conversation feeling light. Adam arrived with a restlessness that had been building for too long, a sense of being trapped between the need to be understood and the instinct to control the story in a way that still served him. Sally arrived with the familiar caution of someone who had paid too high a price for trusting the wrong person. Someone who believed she had finally escaped Adam's orbitally to be pulled back in by sudden run-ins, unresolved friction, and a past so complicated it kept forcing itself into the room whenever she tried to move forward. Their most recent tense encounter left a thin, gritty film of anger and disappointment in the air, something invisible but stubborn so that any sentence could become kindling. Adam knew that. And that was exactly why he wanted to clear the air, not because he truly believed they could return to what they were, but because he couldn't stand the idea that all that remained between them were sharp edges, misunderstandings, and avoidance. He hated the way Sally always seemed to head in the opposite direction the moment they crossed paths. He hated how it left him standing in the hollow space of the same question over and over again. Did she despise him for who he was, for what he'd done, or because the two had fused into something she could no longer separate? Sally didn't believe in easy clarity. She knew Adam had a dangerous talent for making things sound reasonable in the moment, for softening someone's guard before they remembered what it cost to let him close. She had lived through enough highs and crashes to understand that some relationships don't need a loud breakup to die, they just need missed timing, misread intentions, the choice of ambition over decency, and then, when you return, all you find are pieces sharp enough to cut. Still, Sally couldn't pretend there wasn't something about Adam's presence that made complete indifference difficult. It wasn't old love, not hope, but something more precise and unsettling, the memory of how clearly they once saw each other, how quickly they once fell, and how deeply they once wounded. When Adam insisted he didn't like the conflict between them, Sally heard both truth and an attempt to preserve pride. Because if they couldn't be close again, the least they could do was learn how to exist in the same world, without turning every shared space into a battlefield. She understood the logic. She just wasn't sure Adam understood what peace would cost her. Sometimes peace meant sitting still long enough to face painful and difficult truths, admitting she'd been vulnerable, admitting she'd been wrong, admitting she'd once chased a feeling she mistook for fate. The conversation began like a blade breaking the skin of silence. Nothing about it could be casual. Every sentence dragged history behind it. Adam tried to keep his tone steady, but inside him irritation burned because rejection, especially from Sally, hit him where he was most defensive. He knew she always wanted to flee whenever they met, and he hated how much that hurt. Adam didn't want to become a symbol of trouble in her life. He didn't want to be the shadow that made her change her path. He wanted to fix it, or at least touch the wound and name it out loud. Sally tried to keep emotional distance by anchoring herself to facts. They weren't in a place where they could talk like to ex-lovers reminiscing. They were in a place where they had burned each other and each had tried to rebuild from ashes. If they looked back now, they had to look with eyes that were no longer young, no longer romantic, no longer willing to pretend that feelings could erase consequences. And then the past appeared between them like a gallery of photographs. Their turbulent love story didn't need to be spoken aloud in full. A single pause, a glance that drifted away, a heavy breath was enough for every frame to play in their minds. Sally remembered the days when everything felt simple, sensation of being seen by Adam, placed at the center of his attention, convinced she could be the exception in the life of a man who always drew controversy. She also remembered the days when everything turned dark, Adam's choices creating aftershocks, circumstances forcing her to explain herself, to defend herself, to endure gossip and judgment. Adam remembered the times he believed he was protecting Sally, when in truth he was dragging her into his own strategy. He remembered how he could love with ferocity, yet act as if love were still part of a larger power game, a world where he always had to win. That memory unsettled him. because it made him question what he was really doing now. Did he want to clear the air? Out of respect for Sally? Or because he couldn't tolerate being the one who lost the story, the one left behind? With her cold silence, Sally hadn't planned to recount anything. But she realized that if she stayed quiet, Adam would keep living inside the version of events he had written for himself, a version where he was the one trying and she was the unreasonable runner. So she sat down long enough, for the first time in a while, to face her own memories and say what she had been holding back, the good, the terrible, and the hardest truths of all. She acknowledged the moments Adam made her feel supported, as if he could open a different door for her in a world built on competition. But she refused to ignore the bitter reality that Adam was also the person who could collapse every foundation with one reckless move, one desperate calculation, one ego-driven strike. Sally described what it felt like to be pulled into the eye of his storms. How every time she tried to build something for herself, the past returned like an indictment. The worst part was that she wasn't only bruised by outsiders, she was bruised because Adam repeatedly made her part of a larger narrative he was chasing, stealing her right to simply be herself. And then Jack's name surfaced like a scar that never fully healed. Adam could try to dodge it, but he knew this was the choke point in every attempt at redemption. He had used Newman Media to take aim at Jack Abbott. He could call it strategy, retaliation, survival in a world that devoured weakness, but the truth remained he chose it. And that choice spread like fire. It didn't only hit Jack. It didn't only fuel a corporate war. It also swallowed the night that should have belonged to Sally. Her Millstonian event meant to spotlight the launch of Abbott Communications had been drowned out by chatter about Abbott sinking. People didn't look at Sally's work, her talent, her ambition, her vision. They looked at the shockwave Adam caused and let it consume the room. Sally didn't deliver this with loud bitterness, but every word carried the cold ache of having her light stolen. For her, it wasn't merely a ruined night or a professional stumble, it was a symbol. Whenever Adam moved with his war instincts, Sally was the one forced to carry the darkness afterward. Adam listened, and guilt didn't soften him the way Sally might have wanted. It sharpened him, made him defensive. Part of him wanted to explain, had reasons. He was cornered. The world never gave him the option to play clean. But another part of him, the part he tried to nurture into something better, understood that reasons didn't undo damage. He looked at Sally and faced a terrifying clarity. She didn't need him to understand, so she could calm down. She needed him to admit what he did, and to admit that she paid for it. Adam always claimed it hurt him to watch Sally flee every time they met. But now he understood. She wasn't running from him as a person. She was running from a pattern. She was running from the possibility of being pulled into a story she couldn't control. And a damn whether he wanted to accept it or not, that'd become her symbol of losing control. Sally continued. She didn't embellish, she didn't exaggerate, but she didn't reduce it either. She spoke about how Adam always wanted to fix things, always wanted to clear the air, yet often arrived too late after she had already endured the fallout alone. She spoke about the invisible force that seemed to tilt them off course every time they grew close. Ambition, reputation, battle lines, and Adam's need to win. She didn't deny there had been real beauty between them. That was precisely why it hurt more. Because if Adam had been only bad, she would have forgotten him long ago. But Adam was never only bad. He was a dangerous blend capable of real tenderness and sudden cruelty, of loving deeply and destroying quickly. Sally named the scandal no headline ever needed to expose, the scandal of two people who once believed they could save each other, only to realize they were pushing each other toward the edge. Adam, still trying to pull the conversation toward an outcome, pushed for something he could live with. He didn't want endless hostility. He didn't want their encounters to be needles tearing at old wounds. He wanted them to coexist in peace, at least on the surface. He accepted they might never be close again. But he wanted a minimum level of calm so he wouldn't always feel like he was standing on trial in front of her. Yet even as he spoke about peace, Sally saw the contradiction. Adam wanted peace, but he also wanted forgiveness. He wanted calm, but he didn't want to surrender control over how the story would be told. And Sally knew that if she gave in too easily, Adam would treat it like a ticket back in it, just into polite familiarity, but into her life. She wasn't sure she was ready for that. She feared her own softness. She feared how quickly his sincerity could become a magnet. How her heart could start whispering that maybe this time would be different. The tension existed because, in a way, both of them were right and both of them were wrong. Adam was right to want the conflict to end because prolonged hostility turns everything rotten. But he was wrong to believe that honesty alone could erase consequences. Sally was right to keep distance to protect herself, because she had learned that one step back could save an entire future. But she was also wrong if she kept locking herself inside the reflex to flee. Because that reflex never truly closed the door on the past, it only sent her circling it, reopening the wound every time she saw him. So this conversation didn't deliver a sweet conclusion. It created a gray zone where neither could hide behind blaming the other entirely. When Sally returned to the memory of her night being overshadowed, Adam couldn't escape. He knew it was the knot that made redemption so hard. Because redemption wasn't about apologizing, it was about accepting that some things break and can't be returned. Adam could insist he never meant to ruin her moment, but intention didn't rescue reality. That made him angry because he hated being seen as a destroyer. But it also forced him to confront the truth. He had fed that reputation with his choices. And in that moment, Adam understood why Sally kept running. She didn't want to stand in another storm he created. After Sally said the hardest truths, she didn't feel lighter the way she had imagined. She felt empty. Speaking didn't erase the past, it only gave the past sharper shape. But at least, for the first time in a while, she wasn't trapped behind silence. Adam saw how exhausted she was and realized peace wasn't a simple agreement. It was a process, and it demanded sacrifice from both of them. Adam might have to sacrifice the fantasy that effort automatically earns forgiveness. Sally might have to sacrifice the habit of leaving before the truth is spoken. And if they truly wanted to coexist, they would have to stop turning every encounter into a contest of winners and losers. Still, peace did not automatically mean reunion. The question hung between them like a wire under tension after everything. Could they find their way back to each other? Adam didn't say it out loud, but it lived in the way he looked at Sally. In his insistence on clarity, in his discomfort with her constant retreat. Part of him still believed that if they stopped fighting, something might be rebuilt. Sally didn't dare to treat getting back together as a realistic option. She only knew that every time she believed she had left Adam behind, he appeared again and reminded her there was still a thread connecting them. She didn't know if that thread was leftover love or simply the scar tissue of unresolved pain. By the end of the conversation, they didn't become friends, they didn't become lovers. And they didn't become strangers. They became two people who had finally looked straight at the scandals inside their relationship and understood that if they didn't change how they existed near each other, they would remain trapped in the same loop of collision and retreat. Adam might find a way to coexist with Sally in peace, at least outwardly. Sally might accept sitting still long enough not to turn every meeting into an escape. But that temporary calm carried its own danger, because it opened a possibility both of them were trying not to name. If they could speak like this, if they could look back without exploding, what would happen the next time old feelings surged? The next time a good memory brushed against the present? The next time Adam looked at Sally as if there were still an empty space for her in his life? And the next time Sally realized she wasn't running as fast as she used to? And that was the quiet, threatening hook at the end. They had found a way to coexist peacefully. But this peace was not an ending. It was a door that had just cracked open. If Sally once ran because she feared an explosion, now she began to fear something even more dangerous: silence. That might let her hear her own heart. And Adam, seeing that Sally didn't turn away immediately, became haunted by a question he still refused to face directly. Did he want to make amends so Sally could finally be free? Or did he want to make amends so he could pull her back in? And as they walked away with a little more air between them, that very space became the most delicate trap of all, because the next time they crossed paths, would Sally pass him in silence like always, or would she pause for one more second? Long enough for everything they survived to start feeling like an invitation neither of them was prepared to refuse? On our TV Spoilers channel, I'm always looking for content inspiration for each video by compiling short video clips to analyze and offer my personal opinions. This channel specializes in analyzing, theorizing, and discussing plot points in the Young and the Restless series from the perspective of a longtime fan. Through this, viewers can gain deeper, more objective, and more interesting insights. Subscribe to the channel to stay updated on the latest news about the Young and the Restless series.